All right. We're the show Men Talking Mindfulness. And mindfulness, according to our guests today, isn't what we should be going for. And fear isn't something to conquer. It's something to embrace. Today, we're talking with a world-class athlete who went from being the most fearless woman in extreme sports to redefining the way we understand fear, anxiety, and flow.
Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness.
Our guest today is Kristen Ulmer, once the best female extreme skier in the world for 12 years straight, and now a leading voice in the conversation around fear and anxiety. She believes that we've been taught to handle fear by conquering or ignoring it. And that is fundamentally flawed. Instead, she's developed a revolutionary approach that helps people transform fear into a powerful tool for personal growth, high performance, and even joy. Her book, The Art of Fear: Why Conquering Fear Won't Work and What to Do Instead, challenges everything we think we know about managing fear and anxiety. And today, she's here to share what actually works. Kristen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We're so excited to get into this. And I'll tell you, right before I hit record, we were talking about the 55-degree slopes or 55% slopes or something in Salt Lake. And I was like, yep, I've got plenty of fear about those. And I think it's a healthy fear, but we're going to talk about fear, and we're excited to hear what you recommend we do rather than conquering it. Will, my friend, good to see you, brother.
It's great to be back. Kristen, thank you so much for joining us today. This is, I don't know, with this, we need more conversation around this because fear is something that gets in the way of so many dreams, so many opportunities, the lives that people want to lead and leave behind for sure. But let's just ground with one breath, real simple. Exhale out completely. Maybe close your eyes if it's available for you to do that. Empty. Just take one big giant belly breath in. A little bit more, all the way into the head. Hold just for 3 seconds, 2, 1, and let it go out nice and easy and softly. Yeah, melt into your chair as you exhale. Great, and we are back with the show. Kristen, so good. John, you want me to start?
Yeah, jump into it, man.
Yeah,
don't be scared, man.
Okay, I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I'm not
that
intimidated
fear.
by our guests.
Embrace
Okay?
it. No.
I'm embracing this shit, okay? All right, so Kristen, I watched your Mind Valley talk, and I thought a great place to start for us was you say in that talk, your relationship to fear is the most important relationship in your life. Why is this the case?
Well, we have this amygdala, and it's the oldest part of the brain, and even a chicken has one. It's very simple, but it takes in a tremendous amount of data. 11 million bits of data per second coming into our system gets run through the amygdala. And you have to forgive me, I'm just recovering from the flu, so that's why I'm all gacky. But
you sound great.
Yeah, thank you. So good. 11 million bits of data per second. And with that, it's not a thought producing part of the brain. It's an emotion producing part of the brain. It doesn't have thoughts. And in a flash, without thought, it'll determine safe or not safe. And if it's not safe, there's a threat, it'll send a shot of discomfort into our bodies and that's actually proven by science that it shows up in our bodies first, just as a sensation of discomfort. And then it flows through our bodies like water through a hose and provides for us on-point, intuitive reaction, fight, flight, freeze, without thought. And then it's gone 10 to 90 seconds later until the next threat shows up, of course. And it's the perfect design. Nature didn't get it wrong. But here's the thing. Fear is with us pretty much every single moment of every single day in every single interaction we have. I feel it talking to you guys right now, you feel it talking to me. And it's just here all the time. Even if you don't leave your house, it's going to be here. So most of us are in denial of this. We don't want to believe it's true, especially the spiritual crowd. We think we're all about love, right? And we are, but we're also all about fear. And our relationship with this part of life that's with us every moment of every day, of course, you can imagine is very important. Most people do not have a good relationship with it. In fact, I would say at this point, none of us have a healthy relationship with it. Yet our relationship with fear is the relationship that we have with ourselves at our core, the nature of life and our own bodies. And if you are in resistance to that fear, you're going to have a really difficult life. But if you're in flow with the fear, then you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm just thinking, as you said, that we have fear all the time. I'm sure it's driven all sorts of things in all our lives. Fear of loss. I've got children, and there's instant. As soon as the children are even conceived, there's a fear of loss there. There's fear of loss of money, fear of loss of power, all of which we're going to get into during this discussion. But you've been called the most fearless woman athlete in North America. I would probably argue in the world. But your entire approach to fear kind of goes against the idea of conquering it. Yeah. When and why did your relationship to fear change?
My relationship with fear has been pretty consistent, but now that I teach a healthy relationship with fear and anxiety, I use the words interchangeably. It's gotten better. But during my ski career, so I was considered the most fearless woman skier in the world and the most fearless woman athlete in North America. And I did a lot of dangerous sports. And I realize now that I wasn't fearless, that people have this belief that people like me have a damaged amygdala. I know there's a rumor about Alex Honnold about that, who free soloed El Capitan. Like, that's not true. I've talked to him. Like, we don't have a damaged amygdala, and we're not fearless. Fearlessness is the romantic ideal. And if we were, we would all be dead, all these extreme athletes, because we'd lose access to our instinct and intuition. And the fear is actually the reason why we do it. So more accurately, I realize now, I didn't know back then. I had no idea what the magic was. First of all, I was willing to feel fear. That's why I would be in those situations in the first place. I would even go so far as, I was an addict. I was addicted to fear. And now I do not recommend that to anybody. It's dangerous. This is as dangerous as being addicted to heroin. But I just loved it. And I thought I loved the skiing, but really I loved the fear, and I loved the flow state that the connection that I had with fear offered me. So fear plus intimacy equals a flow state. So when I'm out there and I have this tremendous amount of fear, the same amount of fear that anybody would have standing at the top of a mountain where you could fall and die and maybe it will avalanche. But first of all, I was willing to feel it, and then I was addicted to the place that it took me, because the intimacy with it turned me from, like, I'm Batman and fear's Robin and we're stronger together than apart. And by having intimacy with that huge, normal, natural part of the human experience, it took me into a spiritual place that we call the zone, or a flow state, which is a heightened state of intuition and reaction without thought that I kind of already mentioned, that helped me be magnificent out there. That's if I did it right, right? I did some things right by fear, and I did some things wrong by fear. And the things that I did right, I just explained, and that's what made me the best in the world at my sport for 12 years, and helped me be so, and I didn't have PTSD. I mean, I saw some stuff, of course. I've seen friends die. I've had over 60 near-death experiences, and also survived my career without PTSD. So was in flow with that fear. But I also was in resistance to it, like most people are, at the same time, or, it was always changing. So I had a good relationship, and I also had a compromised relationship at the same time. So I've done both, and that's what gives me the perspective that I have, so that I can teach people about what to do and what not to do, based on my own experience, and also what I've experienced by working with clients.
Genius. And I had to turn away for a second because I had to grab something that's on my back shelf here. Will knows it's back there. But it's my Batman. And I have Batman there, ironically, because he represents fearlessness to me. But I guess even Batman has fear. So I love that you mentioned Batman, and it's right there on my shelf.
I have a little elephant.
Fear is what makes Batman so sharp and focused.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Because he truly is afraid of the bats, right?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing that people get wrong about fear.
Yeah.
We think that when I'm talking about fear, like, oh, so do you mean that people are scared or afraid all the time, 24/7?
Right.
No. In fact, I don't know that I've ever felt scared or afraid in my life. And I'm a fear addict. Except for this. My cat brought a snake into my house once uninjured. Jumped on me from the balcony and landed in my hair. And
oh my goodness.
Okay. Well, I felt scared.
It's okay. It's okay, Kristen, to have these moments of fear. Just so you know.
But when I say fear, I mean any kind of discomfort that's in our body that feels emotional. Yeah. And fear rarely shows up as scared or afraid. Like, fear is a noun, and scared or afraid are adjectives. There's also verbs. And so fear can show up as scared or afraid, but it's very, very rare. Yeah. And fear can also show up as worry, anxiety, nervous, it can show up as anger. Like anger in many ways is just fear's fight energy. Like the mama bear, she has her claws out, right? She looks angry. Really, she's afraid you're going to hurt her cub. And it can show up as jealousy. It can show up as aches and pains. It can show up as excitement or focus or presence or aliveness. And that's how it would show up for me. And that's where people get fear wrong. It's not scared or afraid that we feel when we're feeling fear. It could be any number of other things. The other thing that people mistake about fear is that, and actually, Jon, I heard you start to do it. It's like you immediately started to try to identify the thing that you're afraid of, like fears with an S. But the thing is, if we flow with fear, the fear just stays in our bodies and they never goes into our minds and turns into a fear with an S. And so for me, fear is just fear, not something that we can identify specifically. Like, we're never going to be able to figure out which of the 11 million bits of data per second is warranting the fear. And the second we try to start to figure it out, we're in our heads dealing with it intellectually. And why do we do this? We think that if we can figure out what we're, quote, afraid of, then we can get rid of it or control it or rationalize it away. So most people are dealing with this emotion called fear intellectually because of modern definitions about EQ and a whole bunch of other reasons. But I've never actually identified fear, and I could, standing at the top of the mountain, I could die, I could break my heel for the third time. I could blow my knee out again. I could make a fool of myself. They're filming me from the helicopter, right? I could identify what the fears with an S are, but standing at the top when I was at my best, I wouldn't be in my head thinking about that. I would just be in my body, connecting with the fear in my body, which would take me into a lower center of gravity, because that's where the fear is in my body, which is a better place from which to perform than my head. And then that intuitive resource called fear, like if we don't have a connection with fear emotionally, physically, we lose our intuition and our instinct. And next thing you know, we're not going to perform as well. So, I mean, that was a lot. How
great
questions. Help me sort that out. Like, because when I think of fear, and you just addressed some of this, like when I'm thinking fear, I'm thinking definitely not going into flow state, because I'm like paralyzed. I'm like, stop. So what? Fight, flight, freeze is usually what happens when fear comes up, right? So either trying to fight whatever that circumstance is away, we freeze from it, or, we kind of flee from it. Whereas like you mentioned about like how it, and in your talk, you say you begin to dance, flow experience and fear, like they begin to kind of dance together. So like, where's that crossover from, you're standing on the top of that mountain, you have like the 3, 2, 1 count before you need to launch down this, this cliff that nobody's ever, skied before. And, but now but you're really absorbing this experience that we'll call fear in order to, get into that intuitive state, which I'd imagine an intuitive state, you have to have a certain sense of calm, if you will, in order for that intuitiveness to come online. We had actually Stephen Kotler on here. He describes flow state with the acronym STER, STIR, right? So selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness is what he determines as the flow state. How does that fear help you to get into that state and then dance with it and then be able to perform?
I love Stephen. He's one of my best friends. He's
he's
put
great.
me in a bunch of his books and what I talk about regarding fear. So, let's back up a little bit and Jon, your background, military. So in basic training, of course, the image of the drill sergeant yelling in the person's face, and then they're stoic, and it's specifically taught to just remain unaffected in the face of adversity or things that would warrant fear. Like, a drill sergeant yells in my face, my amygdala is going to light up like a Christmas tree and create a lot of fear. But, soldiers are taught to just be stoic in the face of this fear. And they think that that's the proper way to train a soldier. And then, of course, we know the statistics on PTSD with soldiers. It's because we don't, we're basically training not people how to deal with fear in that environment. We're training people how to not deal with fear. And so most people think that the only way to get to a high performance state is the radical denial of fear. And what happens is, in order to remain stoic in front of the drill sergeant, we kink the hose, like we just stop the flow of fear. And it feels very powerful. Like I'm just feeling nothing, no access to that fear or emotion or my anger, or the hurt from being yelled at by somebody and all that. And so that's what most people think needs to happen in order to be a high performer in a very unsafe environment. And I'm not just talking about people that go to war or people who ski stuff like I used to, or still sometimes do, just for old time's sake. But I'm also talking about people in their lives in general that have kids, that have jobs, that are going throughout their lives. We also have been taught to kink the hose. And there are 8 billion people on the planet. There's 8 billion different ways to kink the hose. And when I say kink the hose, to remind you, I said fear is supposed to flow through our bodies like water through a hose and provide for us on-point, intuitive physical reaction in the form of fight. Like for me, when I was skiing something super dangerous, bring my A game, like give it everything I've got. Or flee, like intuition, like something doesn't feel quite right, I'm going to back off. Or freeze, you look at the deer in the headlights and you think, well, they've gone dumb, they've gone stupid. But really that deer just doesn't know what's going on, needs to gather more information. Like freeze for me is asking the guide, what's below, or digging a snow pit, or, just gathering more information. And also having a plan in case of avalanche, all that. Like that's what fear offers us. It's like this intuitive, brilliant gift from the universe resource. And it's all happening unconsciously. Like I didn't even know that that's what was happening during my ski career, that I now see, actually. So I wasn't fearless, or wasn't stoic in the face of fear. What I was actually, first of all, I was in love with fear. And then, so the equation is this. I'm going to give you 2 equations. So fear, and this will summarize, Will, why our relationship with fear is the most important relationship of our lives. These 2 equations.
Thank you.
So here's what not to do about fear. Fear, and we can use the word discomfort, just so people don't get confused by what I mean by fear. Emotional discomfort. Emotional discomfort times resistance, and there are 8 billion different ways to resist it, equals suffering. So,
emotional discomfort times resistance equals
suffering.
We're
taught to resist our fear. We're taught to conquer and overcome it. We're actually taught to fight the fear. We're actually taught to run away from the fear, to avoid the fear. So actually what we're doing, instead of having fear help us fight, flee, or freeze in the face of the situation to better handle it, we're taught to, or we actually are fighting the fear itself, or we're running away from the fear itself, or we're freezing when it's around because we don't know how to handle it. And this is what is now causing rampant suffering in our culture. So fear or discomfort times resistance. Resistance is a catch-all word for anything that helps us not deal with fear, equals tremendous amount of suffering.
Yeah.
Results in anxiety disorders, depression, insomnia, anger issues, and racing thoughts, and on and on and on. Like, it's just, you do not want to be in resistance to fear. You are going to mess your life up.
Well, it's also a force multiplier in this equation. It's not just discomfort plus resistance. It is discomfort times resistance. So the more resistance, the more uncomfort, the more suffering. I mean, just to break it down for my, so John's not very good at math. So I just wanted Jon.
No, I was actually, I have my degree in mathematics. That's why he's giving me shit.
Two of them.
And literally all I'm thinking about is the equations. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, fear is in parentheses, and you can replace fear in parentheses with emotional discomfort.
Anyway,
so I'm nerding out.
Yeah.
Right. So Jon, I'm going to ask you this because you're geek on math. Like 10 level fear times 10 level resistance, 10 being high.
Wow. Yeah.
How much suffering is that?
100 times.
Oh my gosh! Right?
Yeah. So 10 times 10. Don't push me so hard on the air.
He's gonna get scared.
Math in public.
Yeah.
So 10 level fear.
Right.
0 resistance. How much suffering?
0.
Okay.
Right.
Now here's the second equation. We're bringing Stephen Kotler back in. This is what he talks about with regard to me and fear. So this is the flow state definition. So it could be anything times intimacy equals flow. Now that could be something like a piece of cheesecake, right? Times intimacy. It could be your mother times intimacy. Like, and intimacy means there's no separation between you and the thing. Intimacy with your dog equals flow. Intimacy, if you're into gardening, like there doesn't have to be fear involved, but if there's some sort of discomfort in the anything, then it's next level. So let me give you, so we'll just say discomfort times intimacy equals flow. So we can see this in sweat lodges. Heat. Heat times resistance equals suffering. Like, oh no, hell no, I'm not going to get in that sweat lodge. Or, if it's a hot day in the Caribbean or whatever.
Yeah, a cold plunge, same thing. Like I feel a lot of resistance every time I go into that fucking cold plunge. It's like, it's
that's
intense.
Where I'm going next, actually. So you beat me to it. So
sorry, I got it.
Heat times intimacy equals a spiritual experience.
Yes.
Cold times intimacy equals a spiritual experience. Cold times resistance, not so much.
Equals SEAL training.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Lots of resistance there.
But in SEAL training, imagine if you had intimacy with the cold. It's hard to do.
Yeah, spiritual experience.
Pain.
Wow.
Pain times intimacy equals flow. And this is where you see why people in San Francisco that are into BDSM, it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. Or
wow, didn't think we were going there.
No, we did. It's like
let's do it.
Tattoos, right? Some people get addicted to getting tattoos because of the flow state. Well, pain times resistance equals torture, right? But pain times intimacy equals a spiritual experience. And this is why people get addicted to getting tattoos.
That's a good point, and I like that you use that specific analogy or metaphor. Because I actually do enjoy getting the tattoo. I enjoy the experience and even the pain of it. That's interesting. I like that.
To define that intimacy really quick. I just wanted, just because like we're throwing words around here. Thank you, Jon. We'll get back. But intimacy, like, that's a big word here too. Like, so, if I'm going about my daily cold plunge, right? And I want to go create a spiritual experience. Like, so how am I intimate with the cold? Like, or intimate myself, I guess, in order for that spiritual experience to happen?
It's a great question. And I get asked it a lot. And intimacy is an experience that everyone's had. with something.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working with a group of 16-year-old girls, like 50 of them. And one of them raised their hand and said, when you say intimacy, do you mean sex? And I'm like, well,
I'm sure. That's probably where most of our audience's mind went.
Yes.
Like 77% men, they're like, intimacy equals sex.
I know. Masturbating in the cold plunge? Like, what's going on?
I'm just kidding. That's very trash. Right?
Yeah,
like,
that is very. I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly. So
candles, like, yeah. Okay. So I said to these girls, raise your hand if you've ever had an intimate experience with a dog or a cat. And they all raised their hands, and they knew immediately what I was talking about. And I said, was that sexual? And their hands shot down so fast, I thought they were going to break the shoulder. But, we've all experienced intimacy with something or with someone or a situation or the wind, on a beautiful sunny day, or we know what that feels like. And for some reason, when I say intimacy, people immediately say, well, what do you mean? And it's like I'm looking at my cat right now. And there are actually 4 levels of ways that I see people deal with fear. And keep in mind, all of my research, or whatever you want to call it, comes from, I'm a voice dialogue facilitator, and I facilitate conversations between clients and their fear. And everything that I teach is not my personal philosophy. It's actually everything I teach comes from fear itself. Like, fear has told me everything that we need to know about how it wants to be treated, what gets people in trouble with fear, why it retaliates, why it takes over our minds or takes over, and becomes an anxiety disorder. Like, everything that I'm sharing with you guys, I'm just kind of the messenger talking, fear. So there are 4 different ways that people deal with fear from fear's perspective. Now, I'm looking at my cat, right? And I can also use the analogy of my cat to depict them and why intimacy is so hard for people to get to. So level 1 is resistance, which I said is a catch-all word. Some people ignore fear. Some people avoid fear. Some people go numb to not feel fear. Some people become super arrogant to, create walls between them and their fear. The biggest form of resistance I see to fear, especially with smart people like your audience, is being in their heads all the time so they don't have to feel. Let that land. Yeah. And so that's level 1, resistance. And by the way, this is a good transition into calming practices or meditation or letting it go. To fear, one form of resistance to feeling it could be drugs or alcohol, right?
Yeah,
shopping.
I was just going to ask about that.
Right. But another form of resistance to fear is meditation apps, calming practices, breathing exercises, like breathing in calm, letting go of fear. That's to fear. Those things are in the same realm as drugs and alcohol. And I know that this is going to be really hard for people to hear, but they're coping mechanisms, like, okay, I'm feeling super anxious. I'm going to go for a run. Right. And you feel better. Of course you feel better because running is great and exercise is great. But if you're doing it to run away from fear, it's just another form of resistance. And it's in the same category in fear's mind as drinking alcohol or taking, smoking some pot or what have you. So all the things we're actually taught to do regarding anxiety or anxiety disorders, ironically, rationalizing it away through cognitive behavioral therapy and on, are more forms of resistance. And they work. Right. Otherwise, they wouldn't be taught. And they buy us a moment of relief from fear. But it just pisses fear off. And it just comes back. But
ultimately, in the equation, it's still there. So theoretically, part of the equation, it still leads to
suffering.
Not suffering. I was going to say discomfort, but yes, suffering.
Yes.
So,
right.
Yes. And, even medication, I'm not a doctor. I would never suggest people get off their medication, but that's medically supported resistance.
Yeah, exactly.
And so all these wonderful treatments and methods and modalities in order to manage anxiety or anxiety disorders, depression or insomnia or anger issues, all those things are actually contributing to the cause of these disorders and these issues getting worse and worse every year.
Interesting.
They're symptom control, and they work. Of course, they buy us a moment of relief, but they kink the hose, and then fear. Fear
Right.
gets more and more agitated and tries harder and harder to get our attention, and it invades our thoughts, or it turns up the dial on it. Anyway, more on that in a little bit. Let me finish with the 4 levels. So that's resistance.
Yeah,
and it
please.
is,
Thank you.
right? And the cat, right? If I'm in resistance to the cat, and let's say fears, we can use million analogies. Let's say fear's a roommate that we are living with for life. It's 24/7. It's there with us all the time. If I'm in resistance to it, or resistance to the cat, or resistance to anything that's a lot of suffering, like think about what kind of life we live when we're in resistance to something that is living with us and with us 24/7, even living in our bodies, and how much self-loathing that results in, and angst and wars that we have with our own selves and our own bodies, and when it floods into our minds, ultimately also our own minds. So level 1, not advised. Pretty much everyone does it though, because of modern definitions of emotional intelligence, a positivity at all cost mindset in our culture, and negativity shaming or fear shaming. So you can ask me about that more later, but let me finish the levels. So resistance to the cat, resistance to fear. Level 2, acceptance of fear, right? It's normal and natural. There's nothing I can do about it. It is what it is. It's here all the time. Acceptance of the cat, right? But I'm still in my head thinking about this person that lives in my body, or thinking about the cat. And often, let me say one more thing about level 2. There's a lot of people that teach acceptance, but it's followed by what I call the dreaded comma. And when you're having an argument with your wife and she's like, I love you, but, right? And then just forget what she just said. What she's really trying to say is the next sentence. So it's the same thing with a lot of people regarding fear. It's like, oh, you don't want to resist fear. You want to, it's normal and natural, right? You got to accept it, comma, now let it go. And we're ricocheting right back to resistance. Letting our fear go is like the worst advice ever given. It's like nobody's ever let go of fear. So we get that wrong. But you don't want to let it get the better of you. Or, okay, now you got to rationalize it away. So the dreaded comma just tends to, even if we step in level 2, ricochet us right back to level 1. So then there's level 3, feeling. I've talked to fear at length about this. Fear is an emotion. It wants to be felt. It wants to be felt.
Right.
Emotions want to be felt. And that keeps us in our body and flow with it. So speaking in terms of the cat, right? If I'm in resistance to the cat, okay, if I accept the cat, if I'm now feeling the cat, I'm now having a physical experience with the cat. And here's where people say, well, what do you mean feeling? It's like, well, I mean, feel your sweater, right? What do you mean by feeling your sweater? Just feel your sweater. Just feel the cat. Just feel your fear. Find it in your body, feel it. And a lot of people try to understand what I mean as a form of resistance to not connecting with their fear, because they're so invested in being in their head trying to understand. You just feel it. It's very simple. Once people get it, once people realize that they have to get out of their heads in order to get it. And when I say feel the cat, people just go over and they feel the cat. But when I say feel fear, they have a hard time with that. And then what I found is level 3, if we just learn how to feel our fear, that just organically takes us into level 4, which is the intimacy piece that I'm talking about. Because the longer I'm feeling the cat, no thoughts, no agenda, I'm just feeling the cat, it just kind of takes me there. And then when you have the intimacy with the cat, there's no separation between me and the cat. It's beautiful, spiritual, grounding, present, fullness of our present experience. And that's what's possible with fear. And then it's not like we transform the fear into a resource. It just naturally becomes a resource, and we don't even know we're doing it.
With these defining these different levels, which I love. You said the modern definition of EQ, and then you also mentioned fear shaming. Let's talk a little bit more about those.
Well, there's a lot of different definitions or iterations of EQ. But for the most part, I mean, there's some good stuff in there, but there usually involves a dreaded comma. Like, oh, you want to, figure out where your emotion is in your body. You want to connect with it. You want to feel it, comma, and now let it go. Or now manage it. Right. Or don't let it have the final say, or negotiate with it. Or, so it doesn't matter what is said beforehand. The only thing that matters is what happens after the dreaded comma. And for the most part, let me summarize what emotional intelligence. I mean, there's books. Every time I go through the airport, I'm like, all right, let me look at this latest EQ book that they have in the, and I'll pick it up and I'll
a few on the shelf,
and I'll be like, I'll like, please stop saying this, right? But it in summary, it's for the most part it's seen as our ability to understand our emotions and manage or control them. Now, let me break down each of these and why they're a bad idea. First of all, if we try to understand our emotions, next thing you know, we're dealing with emotions intellectually.
Right. We're in our head.
Which kind of leads us into why I don't think mindfulness is the best approach.
That's where I was going next.
Right. Yeah. Because the word mind is in it. So we're dealing with our emotions intellectually when we try to understand them. And we're never going to be able to understand them. I see fear as a person that lives in our bodies. Have you ever been able to understand another person?
As far as what they're truly feeling?
No, just understand another person. Just like.
Yeah, I guess at the deeper level, no.
I mean, you can see their behaviors and come up with some ideas of why they behave the way they behave. Even your children, even the people, your spouse,
That's impossible.
Like close to you, it looks like this person does. Like sometimes you're like, oh, I kind of get them, but really they don't even understand themselves, right?
Right.
I mean, how much do we understand ourselves?
Right.
Yeah, true.
Right. Mm-hmm. So how are we going to ever understand something as old and wise as fear? And how are we ever going to figure out which of the 11 million bits of data per second coming through the amygdala is warranting the fear? Like we may think, oh, it's fear of rejection or fear of failure, or what have you, but the deeper fear underneath that and underneath that and we're never going to be able to figure it out. But this puts us, the attempt to figure it out makes your therapist very rich, right? And then puts us in our head dealing with our emotions intellectually, which is the biggest form of resistance to feeling them, which is thought-free that I've seen. And it keeps us in our heads as well. So it's the second part. There was one more thing I wanted to say about intellectualizing, and I've forgotten what it is. Anyway, maybe it'll come back. But the second part, managing or controlling our fear. So imagine your children or your wife, and if you try to manage or control them, how is that going to go?
Never will.
Right. Yeah.
I tried to do that this morning with my kids. Get your fucking boots on. I mean, I didn't say it fucking, but how many times did I have to tell them to put their boots on? Because it's snowing here and they need boots to go to school. And I could not understand. I couldn't understand why they weren't. And then I tried to control them. And my little girl, my 7-year-old, went off to school very angry at me.
Right.
And there you have it. So our attempts to manage or control fear is the reason why fear is rebelling. It's like, oh, no, you don't. Like whatever you try to control will wind up controlling you. And you do not want to pick a war, conquering and overcoming fear with fear. It kink the hose, it'll rebel, and it'll do whatever it takes to get your attention. It'll either turn up the dial and show up as excessive worry, or what we're now calling anxiety, which is fear that's seeming here recirculating round and round for no reason. It'll show up as anxiousness or stress all the time. Or it'll flood into your thoughts. If you're living in your head, it'll try to get your attention there and take over your mind, and fearful thoughts, waking you up in the middle of the night. Like if you're really good at being stoic and blocking it out during the day, it will not be denied. It'll wake you up in the middle of the night and make itself known then. And then what happens is we then try to control our thoughts, which also will rebel. And next thing you know, we're at war with fear. The war is being carried out in our own mind. Our mind is fighting a war with fear. Fear will win every time. And then you're fighting. I mean, there's like all these wars going on that are unwinnable until you take medication. And that just, there's a whole host of complications there. Or the fear stuck in your body will show up redirected. And this is the most interesting one, in ways that don't even seem like fear, either as excessive jealousy or anger, or it'll go to a physical part of your body where you're weakest, like your lower back or something, and turn up the dial there, or show up as headaches. Like it'll just show up redirect in other ways. And then what happens is once it starts to act out in this crazy, weird, disjointed, irrational way, what do? We double down on resistance. And then it surges even more, in rebellion. And then we triple down on resistance until eventually, what is an anxiety disorder, for example? It's when we're living in a permanent full-time state of resistance to that fear, and that resistance war takes over our lives until all that we actually feel is the resistance, which is no, what's wrong with me? Make it stop.
It becomes who we are.
And then the doctors will help you come up with new techniques to resist it. It's just it's madness. Like, from where I'm sitting, like EQ, we've got this is the domino effect that happens with EQ being taught that way, and fear shaming, and a positivity at all cost mindset.
Well, yeah, EQ in the sense of, like, I think it's important not necessarily to intellectualize and try to figure out where the fear is coming from, because it's an emotion, so you can't even possibly do that. But EQ from the somatic perspective is feeling it, knowing where it is, being with it, accept it, and then moving forward with it. Like that's like would that be a better way of processing fear through being more aware of our emotions, like through the EQ realm? Is that
what you just said? Sounds great.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, but I feel like is there a comma?
It almost always finishes with the dreaded comma.
Okay.
There it is.
All right.
And we're right back to level one. What came after your comma was moving forward with it, but you do not find many people that only stick with a connecting language. And words matter. They really do.
Yeah, completely. Right. Excellent. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for clarity.
Well, with that all in mind, we actually have a meditation course.
Yeah, we do.
Coming up. And you can learn more about that at mentalkingmindfulness.com. It's coming up in April 27th. So check that out.
Yeah.
But don't think of it as resistance. Let's think about it. Let's feel a different way about it. Now, that aside, Kristen, for our audience, and our audience, I'm sure, have resisted. We've all done it, right? For people who have fear and anxiety in their daily life, what would you recommend is the first step in changing that relationship with that fear or anxiety?
The first step is changing our language about how we speak about it.
There you go.
It is absolutely the most important part. And quite honestly, it could be even enough to end this on a dime. And that includes our relationship when we speak about fear or any kind of emotional discomfort within our own minds. But let me tell you, so I had a stalker for a while back, like really bad, like breaking news, they interrupted
Really?
Oprah,
No way.
Yeah, this is all over the news. Wow. So I ran into a friend of mine.
Stalker there, Kristen. God damn, it's a serious stalker.
You really made it when you get stalked.
Exactly. Wow. Okay.
That's my new goal.
Yeah, I know. I need a fucking stalker.
Sorry to laugh because I'm sure that was an awful experience.
Yeah.
But
it was. He's deceased now. But so anyway,
did you kill him?
What's that?
Did you kill him?
No.
Did you kill him,
No,
Kristen? Sorry, I went dark there.
Yeah, no, that's. I'm trying to resist making jokes about that, and I'm like 10 though. But I have respect. Let's move on. So
Thank you.
Anyway, I ran into a friend of mine who's a life coach 2 weeks later, and he saw me and he said, "How are you feeling about that?" And this is before this person he died and that he was in jail and I had to testify and the whole thing.
Oh my gosh!
And
wow.
I said I'm really angry. And anger, as I said, the more I look into anger, the more I realize it probably isn't even an emotion. It's more just fear's fight energy, which is exaggerated. If it's exaggerated, that means you've kinked the hose on fear, and then it's coming out in an excessive, bizarro way. So I said to him, "I'm really angry." And what do you think he said to me when I said I'm really angry?
He said, "That's not a feeling."
No. He said what most people would say, which is, "Oh, you don't want to feel anger. That'll eat you from the inside out. You need to let that go. You need to, And I said to him, and this is what I mean by changing your language. And it's like in the words of the Beastie Boys, fight for your right to party, right? Fight for your right.
Brooklyn.
No sleep till Brooklyn.
I'm in Brooklyn right now. Brooklyn. Okay, sorry. Throwing me back there, Kristen.
We're going down a lot of sidetracks.
And we're going down fucking sidetrack.
I love sidetrack. So what I said to him, I said, "Please don't try to rush me through my emotion so that you can feel more comfortable. It's here for a reason."
Good for you.
Wow. Look at this.
Yeah.
Damn.
It's a powerful thing to say. Another example of this is, so I had a client whose 9-year-old kid was crippling anxiety disorder, panic attacks, the whole thing. And they went to a water park as an example of this with the 11-year-old daughter, 9-year-old kid. And he said, "Do you want to get on the water slide?" And the kid said, "No." And then the father said, "Well, it's perfectly safe. There's no need for you to," very well-meaning, right? "There's no need for you to have fear. Look, your sister just went down. Grandma just went down and everything's fine." Like the father's trying to talk the kid out of his fear. And that actually right there was the cause of the kid's anxiety disorder. What he should have said, the father, and I instructed him, changing your language, is, yes, the water slide is designed to induce fear. That's because otherwise he's fear shaming his kid. It's like there's something wrong with you that you even have fear, which is where the problem starts and why there's 1 in 3 teenagers right now don't just have anxiety, they have an anxiety disorder. And it comes from parents, society, like there's nothing to be afraid of, you got to let that go. Like that starts at a very young age. So I said, next time you go to the water park, say this to your kid. Of course, it's designed to be scary. You can put that word in there. They design it that way because people find fear to be exciting and kind of making them feel alive. Yeah. So notice we're acknowledging the kid's fear, that it's validating the kid's fear, and then saying, "Are you in the mood for fear right now?" to the kid. The kid will probably say no because he's been conditioned to be embarrassed about his fear. And the other thing that happens with kids that have an anxiety disorder is they are fighting for their right to party. They're fighting for their right to have fear by even turning up the dial on it and rebelling against fear shaming, rebelling against dad saying, "I have a right to feel this and I'm going to feel it all the way." So just by changing his language with his son and constantly asking, "Are you in the mood for fear? Are you in the mood for fear?" I have another client too, who is making his mother deal with all his fear on his behalf. She has to drive him to school rather than getting on the school bus. She has to walk him to his classes and even in between his classes because he won't even go in the hallway. Like our relationship with fear pretty much determines every single aspect of our personality and our life choices, has an influence on it, at least. And I helped her see what the son's relationship with fear is. I don't want to deal with it. You got to deal with all my fear on my behalf. It's like you start to see people's relationship with fear. And if it's compromised, the 8 billion different ways that can show up in some sort of strange behavior. And the solution for every single one of these issues is all the same, which is unkicking the hose, getting back in flow with fear again, the way nature intended, which starts with feeling and turns into intimacy.
Wow.
And the language is the starter.
Yeah. I love that. And you know, I think I spoke about this on one of the recent episodes. My little boy, he's learning how to ski, my 5-year-old, which we talked about right before. And, you know, he was on the bunny slope, and then we went on the lift for the first time, and he was scared. And I told him, don't be scared. It's okay. You know, don't be scared. So I was inadvertently fear shaming him. And, you know, I learned how to ski as an adult. And the first time I went on a ski lift, it was scary. I mean, they're still scary. If you look down from some of them, you're like, man, if I fell from this, that would not be good. But so it would have been better to say, well, the lift isn't designed itself to be scary, right? So it would have been, what would have been a better way of phrasing that, question. Kristen, in that experience?
Well, let me just back up. Like I run these ski camps. They're called the Art of Fear ski camps. And
okay, of course.
I finally had somebody call me who had never skied before. And she was 38 years old. And she says, get me in the right mindset to learn skiing. And I said a couple things. So you can put this through your filter with your kid too. I said that the whole reason why people go skiing or take up skiing is to feel fear. That's the whole point of it. Right, nobody would buy lift tickets if it, weren't for that.
It's like horror movies.
Yeah. And again, I don't mean scared or afraid. We don't go skiing to feel scared or afraid. Fear and excitement are neurochemically pretty much the same thing. Go there to, and also, there's no learning or growing without a willingness to feel fear. So the other thing I said to her, fear, this is huge. You ready for this?
Yes.
Fear does not hold anybody back from doing anything ever in the history of the world. We get that wrong.
Yeah, we hear all the time that fear has, killed more dreams than anything else. Yeah.
Fear's upset about this. Fear does not hold anybody back from doing anything. We get that wrong. It's our unwillingness to feel fear that holds us back.
Wow.
Do you feel the difference?
Yeah. No, it's a huge difference.
Yeah.
It's a huge difference.
So I said to her, you have to be willing to feel fear if you want to take up skiing, certainly at 38.
Right.
And even if she was a kid, like we look at the daughter, for example, at the water slide, she looks fearless. She's not. It's like me. I looked fearless during my ski career. No, I was having a love affair with fear. My book, The Art of Fear, the working title was My Love Affair with Fear while I wrote it. And then they changed it in the last minute. But and again, if you have a love affair with fear, the fear only shows up as excitement, presence, focus, and aliveness. And if there weren't any fear involved with the water slide or any fear involved with skiing, we wouldn't have access to any of those feelings. And that's why I say fear is like the best thing ever, Yeah. And some people, when they're bored, they'll go out and take a risk, or maybe their bucket list, when they're going to die, they jump out of an airplane. Why? Because they haven't had enough fear in their life. Like, fear's the best thing ever. So anyway, I digress. So
with my little boy,
yes,
it would have been, he's getting on the ski lift or about to get in the ski lift. We're in the line. It would have been better to have said, it's something about, it's not fear you're feeling, it's the fear of feeling fear. I understand what you're saying, but I'm trying to learn what I should say to my little boy.
Right. So I'll tell you.
Moving forward.
And it's what I said to this woman.
Yeah. Right.
The whole
we're here because of fear.
Reason why we're taking up skiing is to feel discomfort, to feel, because it's there's no growth Like this is our comfort zone. You got to step out of your comfort zone in order to grow where there exists fear. So the whole reason why we're learning this sport is to feel fear. And part of the fear is the chairlift ride.
Yeah.
The whole
anticipation.
experience of learning how to ski involves fear. The chairlift ride, the gravity, right? Like the price. I mean, have you $20 cheeseburgers, like, right? So the whole thing.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes.
Well, it sounds like the whole thing was created because of fear.
The price.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I feel like the whole skiing.
Hold on, Will. Let her finish the thought. I want to understand what I'm supposed to tell my little boy.
Yeah.
This is what you tell your little boy. And this is what I told, let me just finish with her. I said, you have to ask yourself, am I in the mood for fear right now?
Okay.
And if you are, take up skiing. And then you have to be willing to feel fear. And if you look at those of you who are skiers, ski instructors spent their entire careers trying to get people to lean forward in their boots and embrace the fall line and get forward, right? Well, what is that that's preventing? They're in the back seat because they're in resistance to fear, or they're in resistance to gravity. They're in resistance, right? So your kid is probably in resistance to the chairlift, right? You have to say, are you willing to feel fear? Start with that.
Are you willing to feel fear?
Yeah. Are you in the mood for fear could be another question. Are you willing to feel fear? Because it'll get you what you want. And then the kid will either say yes or no.
That's true.
And then you get on the chairlift if it's yes. And if it's a no, then you just wait and just say, okay, let's sit here and not be in the mood for fear together. Right? I don't want to feel fear.
I like that.
And
I love what you said there real quick with the fear will get you what you want.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about everything I've ever gotten.
Right.
I mean, hell, proposing to my beautiful bride, that was scary. I mean, telling her initially that I had feelings for her, horrifying. Yeah. But the things that I've got that were worth a damn all came through being willing to feel fear. That's awesome.
You should feel fear around women.
Right. It's the right woman.
Especially around this one.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Well, no, I mean, I love like a lot of these sports then, whether it's skiing, whether it's race car driving, whether there's anything that has, that can potentially put your life at risk is really to help you grow your comfort zone in a lot of ways. What I'm hearing, it's like, be with the fear and then kind of, I guess, I mean, am I saying correctly? Like act with it, not even the face of it, just be with it. What could okay, here question. So this is just, I'm learning so much. Like we think we're just going to talk about fear and overcoming, or not overcoming fear, but, changing a relationship to fear. But it's like your whole, it's our life that we're changing our relationship with, because, if we're not approaching life with fear, right? Because fear is always going to be, like you said earlier, then we're not growing, right? And if we're resisting it, then we're just suffering. So with somebody that is kind of, someone that's listening, that is kind of trapped in a very comfortable comfort zone, what are some things that they can do in order to begin to grow that comfort zone and begin to experience a different relationship and maybe even a flow kind of dance with fear, if you will?
Well, this is a great way for me to conclude with the girl. I said, you know, you have to be willing to feel fear, ask yourself if you're in the mood for fear. And then when you're skiing, understand that fear is part of the process. And if you can learn how to embrace it and have intimacy with it, you'll be forward on your skis and you won't, need the ski instructor past the first couple runs. And she did it, and she skied a black diamond run on her second day, starting at 38. Like this is what is possible. It's like change your language. It is part of the process. Like, the language is super important. And most people that, for example, take up skiing think, oh, okay, I can't really take a turn until I get rid of the fear. But if you have that language shift in your mind and you start speaking about it, like I'm here to experience fear. And like, that's how Alex Honnold actually free soloed El Capitan. So the first hot tip is change your language. The second hot tip is going to be captured in Alex. Like, here's his comfort zone. He goes to Yosemite. He doesn't have a damaged amygdala. He feels fear just like everybody else. And in your comfort zone, you're still going to feel fear. But by having a willingness to feel fear, that's what's going to get people out of their comfort zone. So he had a willingness. He also had a love of fear. So you step out of your comfort zone. maybe a little bit. The optimal number is 4%. We could talk about that if you want. But you don't want to go too far
talks
out.
about that too.
Too much.
Right.
Not enough boredom, right? So just,
right.
A little
4%.
bit. And some people are naturally adventure seekers and other people are natural comfort seekers. Just, everybody's different, but Alex is obviously an adventure seeker. So you first year in Yosemite, every time he went climbing, he would step 4% out of his comfort zone, connect the new dots. Now he has a bigger comfort zone. And he did that every year for 10 years until his comfort zone was so big. And mind you, the only way to have less fear is to take risks. So the only way to have less fear is to say yes to fear because it expands your comfort zone. The body doesn't want to have to manufacture fear if it doesn't have to. It takes a lot of energy. Right. But you've got to expand your comfort zone so that in order to have less fear. And then the day that he free soloed El Capitan, it was only another 4% out of his comfort zone to do it. And so that's it. That's the second hot tip, a willingness to feel fear. And the third hot tip, what does he do with the fear that he's willing to feel? Intimacy. And the intimacy is a secret weapon to making him sharp and focused when he does that. Now, we have been talking about taking risks, though. We've been talking about fear that we choose, right? But there's also fear that we don't choose. Like when something terrible happens and all of a sudden we have a flood of fear that we didn't sign up for and we're not in the mood for.
We weren't in the mood.
Right. So if you can learn how to have a yes to fear and intimacy with fear during moments of fear that you choose, like water slide or skiing or, signing up for the military, what have you, that will give you a better chance when something happens to you, a trauma or something, that you now also have that in your wheelhouse to deal with the fear that you don't choose so that it doesn't wind up turning into insomnia or anxiety disorder, depression, or any of the other things that people struggle with.
Genius.
What about, one thing, coming back to Alex Honnold, because I watched Free Solo, and one thing he did,
awesome.
It's really great. I mean, we should probably go after speaking with you, Kristen, go back and watch it just to see. But one thing I do remember him that helped him create success on that was he kept visualizing himself going through his notes, like, looking every hand gesture, every foot, every, foothold, every finger was like calculated. I mean, he saw it. Because he wrote everything down. This visualization, is this part of a way to attain more of that flow state when you're in that moment? Is just by, visualizing it, and is that another way to go about this potentially?
Yeah, and it comes back to the 10,000 hours thing too.
Okay.
And there's all these things that people do. And I think if you're going to do something like Free Solo El Capitan, you got to bring out all the things.
I agree.
I don't think that anybody would argue that there's ever been a more radically scary, fear-inducing sports feat in the history of the world than that. Maybe bomb gouter, base jumping from outer space, maybe, but I think Alex would. I don't think anybody would argue with that. And so I think that he also needed to do that. But I don't know that that's relevant to somebody that's listening to this podcast and what they want to accomplish in their life. But that is definitely, like, I'm going to write another book, How to Take Risks and Still Sleep at Night at some point. But until that book is written, right now I'm mostly focused on, starting a business, having another kid, dealing, or how to raise a kid with special needs that you didn't expect, and not wind up, having it affect your life in a negative way. And so insomnia, like all these issues that we face just in people trying to do normal out of the comfort zone things in our lives, and then also dealing with trauma, which everybody faces. My next book is about anxiety and anxiety disorders, and in that book I normalized trauma. Like, we're all just, so many people are just in survival mode from the trauma because they don't know how to handle the emotions that come from the trauma afterwards, and their resistance habits kick in full force. And most people that have some sort of emotional health, people call them mental health issues. I actually call anxiety, depression, emotional health issues. And again, language changer.
Right.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with our minds, just the kinked toes, the emotions flooded into our minds. But if
and the resistance, I guess, which is the kinked toes,
right? Like I don't call it post-traumatic stress disorder because the stress comes from the resistance. I call it post-traumatic resistance disorder. And, that kind of language changer is also very eye-opening. And so like we're going to just even taking basic everyday risks like getting married or having kids or starting a new business or even the risk of dealing with a trauma finally that we haven't dealt with since childhood or what have you. Like that's also a conversation that needs to be had probably more than even how to freestyle El Capitan for anybody that's listening.
Great point.
But it's interesting, like what was Alex's process? But now you have a better understanding.
I love it. Sure. So when's that new book coming out?
No
pressure.
A year minimum, 2 years max.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, Kristen, this has been awesome. Love what we've learned here. I'm definitely going to try to apply it not only in my own life, but in being a parent to my kids, and hope to apply it in their lives, apply it as a leader in business, just apply it all around. If people wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out, find out more about your training and everything else that you're doing?
Well, can I say one more thing that's the elephant in the room?
Of course you can, please.
Of course.
Meditation and mindfulness.
Yes. What's the elephant in the room? Yes, let's do it. Come on, because we're going to wrap it up with a meditation practice or a quick one breath practice, just like we did at the beginning, which I had my eyes closed. I'm curious. I need to go back and watch. Did you practice with us?
I did. Although I was
awesome.
Throat, because I didn't want to gack the whole. So let's start with mindfulness. I mean, who doesn't like mindfulness? And without our minds, we would be a tomato. Like it's all mind, to be honest. But when I talked about the 4 levels, when you get to feeling emotions and intimacy, we are no longer of our minds. Like when I'm feeling the cat, there's a difference between having a mindful experience with the cat versus feeling the cat. Like mindfulness is above the neck. And so I'm actually more into mindlessness. LESS, mindlessness, where we start to have a relationship with our emotions that as much as possible doesn't involve the mind or being full of our mind. And again, words really matter. And so when my ski camps, like great athletic performance starts where our mind stops thinking, where we can get into our bodies. And so I don't want to be mindful when I'm skiing. I want to be mindless when I'm skiing. So that's the first part. As for meditation, like who doesn't love meditation? It's wonderful. The thing is, like pure Eastern meditation, there's no goals. It's just about witnessing or connecting or, but unfortunately in the Western world, we've started to treat meditation as treatment for anxiety or anxiety disorders. And it kind of cheapens it. Yeah. And it usually involves some form of calming practice or, some form of like, it may start off like, okay, you want to connect with your fear, and now let it go. Like there's just so many apps out there that with good intentions, but it just still, and even feel your fear and let it go. Can you hear the fear shaming in that? And the control and the management in EQ and the positivity at all cost mindset, which is why our culture, like the statistics on anxiety and anxiety disorders and depression are through the roof. And if, and then if we see meditation as the solution, it cheapens meditation for starters, and it just becomes yet another coping mechanism to replace it with something more in line with what we want to feel. And it takes us further and further away from what we actually are feeling. So
sorry, Kristen, a lot of what we teach in meditation is truly sitting with those emotions and feeling them, and there being no comma. You know, if there is a comma, it's comma, be with it, comma, be curious about it. What is that emotion? What are you feeling? Not what are you thinking, but what are you feeling? So, but I do like how you phrased it with mindlessness. And I guess in a lot of aspects, that's what the meditation that has benefited me has been. Mindlessness is truly getting out of my mind and getting into my body, feeling it in my heart, feeling it in my stomach, feeling the anxiety, and then being okay with it, not letting it go, acknowledging that of course I feel this way. Of course I feel this way based on what I have going on in my life. What would you say about that?
Well, I'm always listening to the words and running it by what fear would say in response, because I'm curious.
Okay.
And
what would fear say about that?
You brought up, you didn't bring up the one thing that I see a lot, which is observe the thought or observe the fear, but don't associate with it. Just observe it. It's not you. It's just let it pass like a cloud. So just notice that is not what fear wants. And it's, the fear wants to be connected with. It doesn't want to just be observed and not associated with. And then you said, okay, what am I feeling? Be curious about what I'm feeling. Again, that's a mental exercise, right? Like it's like, okay, be curious about the cat, be curious about the roommate, be curious about the fear in our body. And we're still in our heads dealing with it intellectually and observing it and all that. But if you can then take it and have it become more somatic, which Will was talking about, and physical, and now connect with it, and do a dance with it, and put that Barry White on again, and period, right? There has to be a period, because if there's now let it go, we're right back to resistance and the belief that we somehow have control over fear, which we do not. And if we try to control it, it will rebel. So, I love it. And just add just a little extra something that just takes us out of our minds and into our bodies and the connecting experience. And but then, of course, now we're adding goals to meditation there too.
Yeah,
it's tough.
Well, that's one thing I was going to say, like a lot, like what you alluded to earlier about those apps and stuff. It's like, we, think meditation is our medication to anxiety and stress and fear or whatever. And that's not the case. I mean, one of the things that as we teach, we have a course coming up April 27th. One thing we teach in that course and we see come up a lot, I mean, shameless plug, it's our fucking show, right? So, is like letting go of expectations. Like this is a huge thing that I think a lot of people get jammed up in. It's just like, it's not about, like eradicating or, solving a problem, whatever. Like that's just all the mind. The mind's going to keep playing its game, which is just more thinking, and more, analysis, if you will, which is just more thinking. Whereas just letting go, being with, and just and letting the meditation be what it is not going to necessarily solve all your problems. But it will give you insight, into fear, into your body, into the opportunity that you're missing. There's just a lot of benefits in it if it's taught properly. But I think it's not a quick fix. It's not something you just do for our 9-week course and then it's done and over with and you're a master of meditation and therefore you're not going to have any more problems with the rest of your life. It's a practice, just like everything we're talking about here, getting out, it's a practice. You got to keep showing up in the arena and being with things as they are and learning from the wisdom of those things that are the technology is already inside of us. But it's like the language you talked about is so important, but understanding on a deep and meaningful level outside of the mind, but also in the body, is the way to go. And this has been just such a very enlightening. My head's still spinning. We didn't read your book for this podcast, but I'm going to go read your book for sure because I really love how you're packaging fear, and also your relationship to fear, the language to fear. It's so incredibly important. And we've had, I don't know how many guests in this show already, over 150, but nobody's ever talked about fear like this. And this is the way, the relationship and the way that we should be talking about fear and being with fear, and not even managing it, just being with it and let it be kind of our guide in a lot of ways. So thank you, Kristen. This has just been incredible.
Yeah, well, thank you. And you guys are great interviewers. I've enjoyed this.
Thanks, Kristen. We appreciate
it.
So for the guests, or not the guests, sorry, you're the guest. For our listeners, how can they find you?
Yeah.
KristenUlmer.com. I have a TED Talk that's out there. I have my book, The Art of Fear. I run ski camps. I do one-on-one sessions to help broker conversations between clients and their fear. And I help people with emotional health issues.
Beautiful. I love it, Kristen. Thanks for what you're doing out there. And I will wrap it up with one breath grounding practice, just to get in touch with those feelings and feel them. So that'll be, for me, it's excitement. For me, it's gratitude for you and for this episode. Yeah. But for you all and for the audience listening or watching later, let's get into our bodies and feel what it is we're feeling right now. And let's just do that by exhaling and feeling that, holding empty for a moment, and then a nice, long, slow, deep breath in, and let it go. We're just letting the breath go, not letting our feelings go. All right. Yeah. Awesome. That's it. Yeah. Kristen, fantastic having you. Definitely appreciate you. We'll have this up in a couple of weeks and we'll make sure you get a copy of it. Will, I'll turn it over to you. Wrap it up.
No, I've said all I have to say. Kristen, this has really just been brilliant conversation with us today and really helping us to understand fear as it is. And it's actually a tool for our transformation instead of something that we should be eradicating, managing, overcoming. So thanks for this insight today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah. All right. For our audience, thanks for tuning in. If you got anything out of this, which I know you did, please share it with your friends, family, anyone that you feel can benefit from it. And thank you again. Until next time, take care. Peace.
Peace, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.